Fonzie dropped the F-bomb on me. This is going to be the story about how I got my 1970 Dodge Super Bee into a TV special directed by Henry Winkler and starring Scott Baio and Danny DeVito. This is a pretty wild story about how me, as a high school kid, got my car into a TV special directed by Henry Winkler, had that car wrecked, had to build 2 more just like it, got all of my friends' cars into the movie, and crushed on Heather Locklear the whole time. It all begins in January of 1984. Around this time, the TV show Happy Days is coming to a close. And of course, Henry Winkler played Arthur Fonzarelli, or Fonzie, on Happy Days, and he was looking to get into some other gigs. Unfortunately, he was kind of typecast as the FONZ, and he wanted to get into development and also directing. Interesting thing that I didn't realize till I did some research here is he actually helped start MacGyver, the TV show. So how weird is that? But earlier than that, he gets his hands on a script that he really wants to do as an after-school special. Not actually an after-school special, but a CBS school break special, which was kind of the same thing. He ultimately talks the Suits into letting him direct this show. And of course, he has another refugee from Happy Days, which is Scott Baio. He is just coming out of Joni Loves Chachi, which only lasted a season, and of course he was also Chachi on Happy Days. Additionally, Winkler loops in Danny DeVito to play just a bit part in the show. Now the thing is, Henry Winkler has never directed anything before but an episode of Joni Loves Chachi. So he pulls this thing together, and strangely enough, my father ends up being the car coordinator for this hour-long after-school or school break special. This is a photo of my father with Henry Winkler, as my father is the car coordinator on this deal. The working title for this 44-minute school break special was I Can Handle It, but when it came out, it was called All the Kids Do It. The premise of this show is basically, it's a morality play. It's trying to tell you don't drink and drive. The way they do that is they take the character of Scott Baio, and he is an Olympic hopeful. He is training for, I forget, it's either swimming or diving. And while he's doing that, he's also trying to get with this cute girl, which in fact for Scott Baio is not a big problem. He is dating Heather Locklear at the time that this thing is being produced. Anyway, so he's doing that, and he's got his parents going on, and they really love him. Everything's great. He's cool to his little brother, but he likes to go out with the buddies and have a few beers at night. And when he does, of course, he likes to drink and drive. His parents don't know this. And so, at the same time, Scott Baio is dying to buy my 1970 Dodge Super Bee, which is sitting on a used car lot that is run by Danny DeVito. And then finally, there's a scene where Scott Baio comes up and goes, "Where's the Super Bee? Where's the Super Bee? It's gone off the used car lot." Danny DeVito goes, "I don't know." He comes home, and of course, his parents have surprised him with the car. Scott Baio goes out to celebrate the car with all of his buddies, has a few beers, and you can see what's coming. On the way home, he's a little bit buzzed, and wham! Smashes the Super Bee. Parents' trust is gone, little brother looking up to him is gone, and the girl is gone. So, this is kind of the point where we start talking about the car part of the program. To begin with, here is a press photo of Scott Baio and the other actors who were like his bros, having some beers on the hood of my Super Bee. I was not around when they shot this photo, and I was pretty torqued about it, but unfortunately, what was going to happen to my Super Bee was going to get way worse. Now, because my father was the car coordinator, he came to me and was like, "I need a bunch of cars that a teenager would typically be driving." So while I don't have photos of most of them, I can tell you that in the movie were a buddy's 70 446-pack 4-speed Challenger. It was yellow with a black vinyl top. And then I knew a girl who had a 65 or 66 Mustang convertible, so that was in there. We ended up buying a 66 Buick Skylark convertible, very similar to the 66 Buick convertible that I had later in life, the one that came from Rick Payway's house, the Backyard Buick Rescue, just like this car. And then, of course, there was my car, and there would end up being 2 other Super Bees. Oh, the other thing that was very cool is I don't see how I was maybe 16 or 17 years old, and they let me take a car home from the set. I don't even remember why, but they had what was maybe a Zephyr or something like that. It was a two-door Fox sedan. And it was a stunt car, and they had me drive it home. It had a little Hot 302 in it. They had beefed up the transmission so it would bark the tires hard going into second. And it had tubes in the tires, and they ran them at about 60 PSI. And they did that so that it would slide really easily and jump curbs without bending wheels. And they let me drive it home, and I fell in love with that sleeper. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get into the story of what happened to my Super Bee. Now, remember in the movie, Scott Baio owns this thing now, and he's out cruising with his buddies, but oddly enough, in this scene, he's not driving it. There is a blooper reel from this show that you can still see on YouTube.
Oh my God. I thought that was a
So the three actors are in the car and they're sort of getting lost, and you can hear that they're talking, which the director can hear over the radio, and they're saying, "Where do we go?" And all of a sudden, boom, they all got thrown forward in the car. They ran into a pole. It was one of those maybe 6-inch or 5-inch around pieces of pipe with concrete down the middle that was below the sight line of the hood, and they smashed my front bumperette and hood. The guy driving the car was Tommy Swerdlow, and he goes on later in life to do things like, he was a partial screenwriter on Cool Runnings, if you remember that movie. Also on The Grinch, but not the version of The Grinch that was directed by Ron Howard, which would have tied it together in a nice big Happy Days ball. But no. Anyway, Tommy Swerdlow ran into the thing. Of course, I despise this guy for life because he wrecked my car. Not really. Well, kind of. And in the back seat is Scott Baio. And when they hit the pole, he's freaking out for a second. And then he's realizing what happens, and he starts busting a gut. He is laughing so hard. Now, this isn't that cool when you realize that they wrecked my car, especially when you consider that I had sort of chatted it up. It's not like I was tight with the guy, but we talked cars on set. You know, we were a casual acquaintance around the set, and he must have known it was this 16 or 17-year-old kid whose car just got dented. I, meanwhile, am in the trailer at home base, standing there with my father and Henry Winkler and some of the other production people, and we're hearing what's going on the radio. And they call back and they say that they have wrecked the car. Now, I am freaking out at this point. And I mean, I'm literally like, they're going to overheat it. They're going to kill the motor. I'm really freaking out. And my dad's like trying to be like, okay, don't worry. And here it comes. Henry Winkler turns around and looks at me, and he's all stressed out. And he goes, "Look, kid, I'll buy you a whole new effing motor. Just shut up." Except for he actually dropped the F-bomb on me. So here I am, Fonzie, cussing me out for freaking out that they just wrecked my car and water's falling out of the radiator and they're gonna blow the whole thing up. I gotta be honest, the end of the day, getting in the car with my dad to drive home, I remember crying about it. But Fonzie did end up buying me a whole new effing paint job. And that's a good story too. So the car wasn't damaged that badly. It tweaked the hood and it bent a bumperette, but it was an old paint job, so they ended up painting the whole thing. We took it to a paint shop called Paint and Place in Glendale, California, and it was run by a guy named Dwayne McKinney. I would later know Dwayne McKinney in my life at the Bonneville Salt Flats Land Speed Racing. He was what was called a 49er, meaning he was there in 1949 for the very first Bonneville Nationals, and he raced a bunch subsequently to that. Dwayne McKinney's most famous car was known as the Sundowner, and it was a partnership with Gale Banks. It was one of the first twin-turbo cars I was aware of, and it set a bunch of records turbocharged at Bonneville and also at El Mirage in that Sundowner. So that was sort of a connection to later in life. So that's how my Super Bee got its very first paint job, courtesy of the FONZ. Now my car is wrecked enough that it can't continue in the movie, which is a problem for my father, the car coordinator, because they need to finish shooting the movie and there are other scenes that the car is in. At the time, we were able to buy a copy of The Recycler, which was a printed classified paper that we would get all around the LA area back in the day. I remember actually going and buying every region of The Recycler and sitting and pouring through the ads trying to find cars for sale. Well, believe it or not, back in 1984, you could just whip open the recycler and get yourself another 70 Dodge Super Bee, which is exactly what we did. We bought one that was green. I don't remember if it was F8 or if it was that lighter, sort of frostier looking green, but it was green. Strangely enough, with a black interior. Maybe it was F8 because it had a black interior. Anyway, we bought that car and just took it to One Day Paint and Body or Mako or something like that and fogged the thing in Go Mango Orange, which is the color of my car. And we just painted over the dents and everything. It was absolutely horrible. I don't know why I was able to talk the production out of wrecking that Super Bee, because you'll remember the Super Bee in the story has to get crashed. And we knew that we were always going to have a stunt double for that. They weren't going to wreck my car. But I didn't want to destroy a real Super Bee at the time, so I talked them into buying this really horrible 1970 Dodge Coronet 500. It was a terrible car. Probably I wouldn't say that by today's standards, but at the time it was pretty bad. The only photo that I have of it is this one that really shows my father's 1979 Pontiac Bonneville Safari station wagon, and you can just barely see that sort of maroon Coronet 500 right behind it. That car, just as well, we ran the thing into a paint store and had it painted Go Mango. And in this photo, you can see that I homemade a bumblebee stripe and logo out of shelf contact paper. And so then we had what we called the Double Bee, which was the real Super Bee, and the Stunt Bee, which is the one that's going to get smashed in the story that I've got to tell next. This will be no surprise. I've already told you a couple times that these cars are going to get smashed. Remember in 1984, old muscle cars were pretty easy to come by, and nobody really minded smashing them up if they weren't legit muscle cars. For example, you wouldn't want to crash a Challenger RT, but you wouldn't mind that much if a regular Challenger was gone. You wouldn't want to crash a factory plum crazy car, but you wouldn't care that much if it was a factory F8 green car. So I tell you that so that you'll forgive me for this. One of the cars that we picked up for the crash scene was a 1964 Oldsmobile F85, and I'm pretty sure that it was a car that my friend Mitch Ito's grandmother bought brand new. If that's not exactly right, then it's very close. It was originally a silver car, and I can't remember if we had it fogged in blue or if Mitch had painted it blue before we even got it. It was all jacked up in the back, had big Kragers on it, and it was going to be one of the cars that was going to get smashed. So we headed out to the scene that was shot at the corner of Ranchito and Weddington in the San Fernando Valley. And here's a photo of Henry Winkler talking to the stunt driver who was in the F85. And we have another photo of Henry Winkler talking to the guy who's driving the Coronet 500 that is going to be the stunt double for my Super Bee. You can notice in this photo that it does not have a Super Bee hood on it. Movies just didn't care about accuracy that much. And now you're going to have to brace yourself, because this is the actual moment here. Yep, we T-boned the Coronet with the Oldsmobile, completely destroying both cars. It's really hard to watch at this point, especially knowing what the front fenders on the Coronet are worth these days, especially knowing that that Oldsmobile was an all-original one-owner car. It's tough, but it happened. Forgive me. I was 16 or 17 at the time. Here's what nobody expected from the accident. The fact that the Oldsmobile ended up in somebody's front yard across the street. And they ended up having to get a tow truck, which I guess they already had on scene, to drag it off this guy's lawn. Now I'm taking pictures, and in this shot right here, you can see off to the left-hand side, that's Heather Locklear. I was trying to sort of secretly get a photo of her without her noticing, and I didn't get the photo, and she did notice, and I was a creepy little kid. And in this photo, we're looking down Weddington, and you can really see here that the Coronet is pretty wrecked. The guy with not a lot of hair in the foreground, that is Mario Baio, who is Scott's father. You can see that the hood on the Coronet is still pretty good. I ended up taking that hood off, and many years later, it ended up on my Super Bee as a steel hood with a fiberglass 68 Hemi scoop bolted to it. So that had some use. Here's just a couple more photos from the scene. This is obviously after the crash. You can see that they jacked the car way up just with a floor jack, and then they dropped it in the scene so that the in-car camera would realistically look like Scott Baio in the driver's seat had been jostled by an impact, or just as it came to a rest or something like that. They just dropped the car. And in this final photo, that's actually Scott Baio on the stretcher. That's the end of the actual production of this school break special, but the story gets pretty good afterwards also. Somehow I ended up with a whole bunch of cars. One of the guys in the production crew ended up taking the Oldsmobile, so that was gone. But I ended up with the Double B, the actual Super B, and also the Coronet 500, and also the 66 Buick convertible. I ended up selling the convertible to a friend who was actually the brother of the girl who had the Mustang that was in the movie that I told you about earlier. So I ended up with two 70 Coronets, one of them an actual Super B. The Super B, you can see photos of my car and it parked together, which is kind of weird. I really like the one where the Double B is in the foreground and you can see my Super B poking out of my garage in the background. And there are also some shots that were taken at my father's shop on Cumston Street out in North Hollywood. That place has subsequently been leveled and it's a train station. But at the time we were able to park both the cars together and do a whole bunch of part swapping. This is the moment that I gave up the original American Racing 200S Daisy mags that I had on my Super B when I bought it in 1983. I swapped those onto the other Double B that we ended up getting rid of, and I absorbed the 15x7 rally wheels, which I thought were way cooler at the time. The hood and bumperettes off of the Double B ended up on my car when it went to the paint shop and got painted. I also took some interior bits out of it, like a pair of bucket seats, because the bucket seats in my Super B were factory burnt orange and had been vinyl dyed, and there was better black seats in the Double B. You get it. I just swapped stuff back and forth. It gets even better. I also had the wrecked Coronet 500. And to tell you that story, let me tell you this story. My friend Tony was working at Glendale Dodge in Glendale, California, when it was in a different location where it is now. And somehow he had come into a 1968 Dodge Charger that a guy had there that had no engine in it. So in the middle of the night, my friends and I go to the Dodge dealership and we pushed the Charger. It must have been 2 miles. We hand pushed the thing 2 miles to get it to across the street from another friend's house where there was a vacant lot. Pushing this thing at midnight was crazy because we did it by hand. And there was one time when you had to go down a hill and back up another as you went under a railroad track. And I remember we got the thing trucking downhill to try and get it uphill as far as we could. I think we had like 5 guys with us that night. Anyway, we end up in this empty lot, and the plan is to take the 383 and the Torque Flight automatic out of the crashed Coronet 500 and put it in the Charger, which we did successfully. Unfortunately, Tony ended up selling that car because, man, it would be worth a mint today, even though it was green. Then we had the Hulk of the Coronet. I told you that I took the hood off that and it ended up on my car in later years. So there was really nothing left to this but scrap. What we did is just pushed it over next to the railroad tracks nearby, not on the tracks, not where a train was going to hit it, but nearby, and just sat and waited. And sure enough, eventually, we got a notice to our house because I guess that's where the production had titled the car, and it said, "We've impounded your car." And we had the title to it, so we just went down and went, "Oh man, car's totaled. Here's the pink." I can't imagine a TV production working that way today. And in this photo, you can see me looking to be about 11 years old, and the other guy is Pat Ingram, and he's the dude who owned the 74 46-pack Challenger that I told you was also in the movie. And I happen to remember at this exact moment, we were cranking Van Halen 2 on the boombox, which is exactly on brand and everything that you'd expect from this photo. So that's the complete story of All the Kids Do It and how my 70 Super B ended up in a TV school break special when I was still in high school. Do me a favor, go look up my store. I have all kinds of different merch all the time. The link is in the profile. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all of that stuff, and I will see you next time on the David Freiburger Channel.